Welcome to the Explainer. Have you ever stopped to wonder how huge ancient organizations actually got anything done without spreadsheets or modern tech? Well, today, we're diving into what looks like just a long list of names, but it's actually a brilliant blueprint for creating a fair and stable system. We're going to see how King David's administration solved a huge logistical problem with a solution so smart, its principles are still totally relevant. All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to look at the massive organizational headache they were up against. Then, we'll see a major complication that made things even tougher. After that, we'll unpack their really ingenious solution, check out the final 24 shift roster it created, and then we'll tie it all together and see why this ancient system is still such a big deal. So let's set the scene. Imagine you're in charge of the most important institution in the entire nation, the Central Temple. The sacred duties there, they have to happen 24/7, no exceptions, no mistakes. To pull that off, you don't just need people, you need a system, a really good one. And that right there was the fundamental challenge. This wasn't just about making a weekly schedule for a local shop. The work was sacred. The operation was literally nonstop. And fairness? Well, fairness was everything. So how do you make sure everyone gets their turn without causing drama or, even worse, messing up essential rituals? So these were the guys tasked with cracking this massive puzzle. You've got King David as the executive in charge, and then Zadok and Ahimelech. And they weren't just any officials. They were the heads of the two main family lines of the entire priesthood, both tracing their roots all the way back to Aaron. And what's really interesting is that they weren't just trying to throw together a simple work schedule. They were creating what the text calls an appointed order of ministering. So think of it less like a duty roster and more like a highly structured, regulated system of rotational shifts. It was all about bringing order and absolute reliability to the temple. But there was a pretty big hurdle. Okay, so here's where it gets tricky. There was a big complication bubbling just under the surface. If you want to create a fair system, you gotta start on a level playing field, right? Well, they didn't have one, not even close. The two main priestly families were completely different sizes. So the entire priesthood came from Aaron's two surviving sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. As you can see, they were the two main branches of the family tree. But over the centuries, those two branches grew at wildly different rates. And wow, this chart just lays it out in black and white. When they actually counted up the family leaders, Eleazar's line had 16 chiefs. Ithamar's? Only 8. A perfect 2-to-1 imbalance. This wasn't just a small difference. It was a major, major problem. So this gets us to the real heart of the issue. How on earth do you create a fair rotation when one group is literally twice as big as the other? If you're not careful, the larger group is just going to dominate everything, and that could lead to bitterness, resentment, and people crying favoritism. They needed a solution that wasn't just fair, but that everyone could see was fair. So how did they solve it? Well, their solution was just beautiful in its simplicity, and it was incredibly effective. To take any hint of human bias out of the picture, they turned to a lottery. Think of it like drawing names out of a hat or a draft lottery to make a huge decision. It just removes human preference from the equation entirely. And they didn't just wing it. They had a really meticulous process. First, they got all the leaders from both families together so everything was transparent. Then they cast lots, basically drawing names at random to decide the order of the shifts. A scribe was there to officially record every single result. And they alternated the draw, pulling one from Eleazar's family, then one from Ithamar's, weaving them together into one single roster. Now, having the scribe Shemaiah write all this down in front of the king and everybody else, that was absolutely critical. This wasn't some kind of backroom deal. It was a public, official, binding process. And by making it so transparent, they made sure everyone would accept the outcome as totally fair and legitimate. So, after all that careful planning and this very public process, what was the end result? A perfectly balanced 24-division roster for the temple service. The magic number they landed on was 24, and that number was key. It created this complete repeating cycle. Each of the 24 family groups would serve their turn at the temple, and then the next group would take over, all in a predictable, orderly way. And so, with everyone watching, the lottery began. The very first name pulled, the one that established the first division in this brand new system, was the family of Jehoiarib. This first draw really set the tone for the entire system of fairness. So the drawing continued. The 8th lot, it fell to the family of Abijah. And this is where history gets really, really cool. This is the exact same priestly division that John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, would serve in centuries later. It's a direct link from this ancient roster to the New Testament, and it just goes to show how incredibly long-lasting this system really was. And finally, the process wrapped up when the 24th and final lot was drawn, falling to the family of Maziah. And with that, the schedule was set. The problem was solved. The system was officially in place. So you can see this was way more than just an administrative chore. What was the real, lasting impact of this whole thing? Why should we care about this ancient schedule? Well, for starters, the idea was so successful, they didn't just stop with the priests. They took the exact same impartial lottery system and applied it to all the other temple staff. You know, the musicians, the gatekeepers, the treasurers, all from the wider tribe of Levi. And it's helpful to get this distinction straight. Think of Levite as the big umbrella term for the whole tribe that handled temple service. The priests were a specific kind of elite family line inside that tribe, descended directly from Aaron, who were in charge of the most sacred rituals. And this table just perfectly sums up the beautiful philosophy behind the entire system. When they used the lottery for the rest of the Levites, the text says, and I love this, that the oldest brother was treated the same as the youngest. In other words, your age, your status, your family's reputation, none of it mattered. In the eyes of the lottery, everybody was equal. And finally, this quote gives us the ultimate authority behind the whole system. This wasn't just presented as some clever management trick from King David. No, it was framed as fulfilling the original commands for order that came down from their ancestor Aaron under divine instruction. So it had both royal and religious backing. So it starts out as this really old, kind of dry list of names, turns out to be a timeless lesson in fair governance. It's a powerful case study in how you build unity by creating systems that are transparent, impartial, and treat everyone the same, no matter who they are. Which really leaves us with a final thought. What can this ancient model teach us about building more fair and trusted systems in our own complex world today?